So starting out with our F tier, we're really only going to have one character by themselves in the F tier, and it's going to be this guy, Prince Rhomhur Vernius. Absolute trash can character. We'll start out with the base ability, Heavy Lasgun Cannons, and it gives your dreadnoughts 1 extra strength, so they'll have 4 instead of 3. This ability is useless. I'm almost never buying dreadnoughts during the game because, like I've talked about before, spending the 3 Solari to get a dreadnought puts you really far behind in the race to try and get your Swordmaster and High Council. Think about it. Would you rather have a dreadnought that'll give you 3 extra combat every other turn if you're winning combats, because remember that dreadnought has to leave and go to sit on a spot if it wins? Or would you rather have a Swordmaster that's giving you an extra action every single round, or a High Council seat that's giving you 2 extra persuasion every single reveal and enabling you to buy Spiceman's Flows? Swordmaster and High Council are so much better than dreadnoughts that you usually don't end up getting dreadnoughts by the end of the game. And if you do get the dreadnoughts, you're paying such a heavy opportunity cost that it's just not worth it. And even then, if you invest into this, you're only getting 1 extra combat strength. That's really not that relevant. And then looking at the Signet Ring ability, it's Ixian technology, and it either lets you buy a tech or discount a future tech. So let's think about the tech discount version of this. The tech discount is actually a strictly worse version of Memnon's ability. He gets 1 spice that he can use on a Highliners, he can use it to buy techs, he can use it to go to a bunch of different faction spaces. It's way more versatile. Getting the 1 tech discount is like getting a spice voucher that's only good for buying techs. It's strictly worse. I guess the only real value of the Signet Ring is the ability to buy a tech without going to tech negotiation. And realistically, tech negotiation isn't that bad of a spot. You're getting an extra persuasion, you're getting the tech discount. It just doesn't feel that good getting to buy a tech without going to the tech spot. I think the coolest use of it would be getting that intrigue card that gives you some extra troops and going to a combat space so you can immediately send them in. But that's such a specific scenario and you have to spend 5 spice to do it. It just isn't worth it at all. And realistically, if you're picking this character for the Dreadnought ability, you're going to be going to the Dreadnought space anyway, and you can buy a tech that way, making the Signet Ring that much more useless. Overall, this feels like a blank leader. The abilities have almost no impact on gameplay. They provide very little benefit, and the only way it would even remotely feel worth it is with detonation devices. The tech that gives you 1 extra point if you win a combat with a Dreadnought, but even then, the other heroes can buy Dreadnoughts and use detonation devices as well, while having way better abilities. The 1 extra combat strength for Dreadnoughts is a joke, and has little bearing on the outcome of fights. Prince Rhomhur Vernius is a joke character, and that's why he deserves F tier all by himself. Next up on our tier list is going to be the Earl, Memnon, Thorvald. His base ability is called Connections, and when you take a High Council seat, you get 1 extra bump with a faction. This isn't a bad reward. Generally speaking, the one-time use base abilities are going to be worse, and unfortunately, you're usually not getting a High Council seat until later in the game, and you usually want to get the Sword Master first. So getting 1 bump with 1 faction very late in the game doesn't seem super relevant. Compare that to the Duke Leto or the Baron, who can get multiple faction bumps earlier in the game, and you start to realize how lackluster this ability is. It doesn't even get you early shipping. So while the base ability isn't bad, it's really not that useful either, and it's more of a bonus on top of getting your High Council seat. The Signet Ring ability is called Spice Horde, and it gives you 1 spice when you use it. It's pretty straightforward. The main benefit of playing this character is going to be getting the extra spice, and throughout the course of the entire game, you're going to get about 3 to 4 extra spice. Think about it. You have a 10 card deck, you're drawing 5 per turn, so you'll get the Signet Ring ability about every other round, assuming you play it every time you draw it. That, combined with the increasing deck size as the game goes on, will dilute the ring down further, and usually games only go 6 to 8 rounds the entire time. Thus, 3 to 4 extra spice. Really not that groundbreaking, especially considering that this is a slow drip of spice throughout the game. You're not getting that 3 to 4 extra spice up front. Does 1 or 2 extra spice in the early game really make that big of a difference? Probably not. Usually you're going to want Solari earlier in the game, so you can get the High Council and the Swordmaster. Overall, this is an easy to play character. The rewards are just a bonus that doesn't require a lot of skill or extra expertise to know how to use. You're pretty much just picking this character for some extra spice. If you need super early spice to get a 2-cost tech, just go with the Beast. They start with that extra spice instead. So, not a great character. We'll give you some extra spice, we'll give you a bonus bump, but that's about it. Next up, we have the Count Ilban Richese. And this is going to be a surprising pick because I've seen other tier lists that have him a lot higher, and I'm honestly not that impressed. The base ability is called Ruthless Negotiator, and whenever you pay Solari to go to a board space, you get to draw 1 extra card. Fine. Usually you'll take advantage of this ability by going to the Mentat, gaining an extra action and 2 card draws. Not a bad value, and it can set up for some bigger buys from the Imperium row early in the game. However, it does tempt you to use more Solari. Spending on the Mentat will delay the Swordmaster and the High Council seat, and you're giving up long-term value for a short-term burst. Unless you're saving up for a high-value expensive card, that extra card draw isn't going to do much for you, especially early in the game. Compare that to 2 persuasion every round by getting the High Council seat, or an extra action every round. Extra actions and persuasion are critical at the end of the game, and going to the Mentat over and over again just to get that 1 extra action and 2 card draw doesn't seem worth it, especially considering the fact that at the end of the game, people are going to try and take the Mentat away from you. So even if your plan was to get the Mentat every single round so you effectively get a Swordmaster throughout the game, people are going to take that away. A lot of people want the Mentat at the end of the game. A lot of people have have extra Solari at the end of the game. So now you end up playing with one less action compared to everybody else, and you don't have the persuasion needed to buy late game Spice Must flows. And don't even get me started if there's a Duke Leto in the game. He'll be denying you the Mentat over and over again, and it'll be a really frustrating experience. Now let's look at the Signet Ring ability. It's called Manufacturing, and it gives you one extra Solari every time you play your ring. Logically, you would think, okay, I'm getting the extra Solari, that will enable me to go to the Mentat more, kind of paying for itself. But like I said, you don't really want to be going Mentat when you can use that extra Solari to save up for Swordmaster High Council. But you had to think, it's going to be similar to the Memnon's ability, where you're really only getting 3 to 4 Solari throughout the entire game because you're only drawing and playing your Signet Ring 3 or 4 times. Is getting 3 to 4 Solari slowly drip throughout the entire game that good? I think it's better than Memnon because it will enable you to get the High Council or the Swordmaster slightly faster than everyone else, but compare this character to Princess Yuna, who can get way more Solari much earlier. If you want to go the extra Solari game to get an early High Council or a Swordmaster, Princess Yuna just does it better and has a better Signet Ring. Pretty unimpressed with Count Ilban, and that's why he sits in the D tier with Memnon, because they're pretty much just both giving you 3 to 4 extra of a resource throughout the entire game. The main value of this guy is going to come from getting a turn 2 Swordmaster if they can hit Smuggling twice in the first 2 turns and play their Signet Ring for the 8th Solari. This is far from a guarantee because Smuggling is such a valuable space and people are going to be racing to get there. So Ilban and Memnon both accomplish similar things. That's why they both end up in the D tier together. They'll slowly give you 3 to 4 of an extra resource throughout the entire game with their Signet Ring. Do you value the Spice more or the Solari more? Would you rather draw 2 to 4 extra cards throughout the entire game or get a one-time bump with a faction track? I think the Solari is more valuable early in the game. That's why I'm putting Ilban a little bit higher. And I think that extra card draw is a little bit more valuable than a one-time bump with a faction, but that's just me. I think they're pretty close. Our last member of the D tier I don't think will be too surprising. It's going to be Alicia Ecaz. And her base ability is called One Step Ahead. At the beginning of the round, you set aside a card from your hand. And at the start of the second turn in the round, you reveal that card and return it to your hand. If it has one agent icon on it, you get a Spice. If it has multiple, you get a Solari. This base ability is where all of her value comes from. If Ilban or Memnon can get you 3 to 4 Spice or Solari throughout the entire game through their rings, Alicia is straight up more valuable because she can get it every single turn. That's 6 to 8 Spice or Solari over the course of an entire game. And she's way more flexible in that she can choose which resource she acquires. She can get Solari because it's more valuable in the early game, and then later she can transition to getting Spice from that ability. So when compared to Ilban or Memnon in their ability to get extra resources, she just gets twice as much. The Signet Ring ability is called Guild Contracts and lets you pay 1 Solari to get 1 Fold Space card. Honestly, this ability is almost entirely useless. You don't want to use it. You want to be saving up that Solari, like I said, for High Council or Swordmaster. And most of the time, you're going to be going Fold Space early anyway to get access to interstellar shipping. Nobody wants to have 3 or 4 Fold Space cards in their deck because they don't have any persuasion on reveal. So it feels really bad to draw into them and not play them. And it makes it a lot harder to build that early engine because you're missing out on that persuasion. Overall, she's not a great hero, but she gets twice the resource benefit of Memnon or Ilban, and has the flexibility to choose between Spice or Solari. Unfortunately, she effectively doesn't have a ring ability. I would never use it. Okay, our first member of the C tier is going to be Archduke Armand Ecaz. And this is probably a surprising pick because when the expansion first came out, everyone was playing this character. They thought he was so good. They were playing him in the first tournament, and the results just weren't there. Playing this character, they do feel really weak. Let's start out with the base ability. The base ability is called Coordination, and on reveal, if you have at least 2 agents on a green, blue, or orange board space, you can trash one of your cards in play. This is a solid ability. Trashing isn't the best ability in the game, but it's still valuable. The only thing is, the condition is really rough, because early in the game when you only have 2 actions, it necessitates having to give up faction access to trash cards. And that will result in Ecaz missing out on a lot of those cheap 2-influence VPs. And this is also why Ecaz wants to get a Swordmaster super early. If they have 3 agent actions, that means they can go to the faction track and still hit one of the regular board spaces to trash cards from their deck. They also obviously make great use of spy satellites. If Ecaz doesn't have to worry about going to those faction spaces, they can just keep on pumping cards out of their deck and acquiring new higher value cards. So while the coordination ability is good, you usually don't end up getting to use it enough if you're going to the faction spaces, which you generally should be doing. Now let's talk about the Signet Ring ability. It's called Conscript, and it lets you acquire a card that costs 3 persuasion or less. This is a great ability. It allows pulling of high value 3-cost cards before everyone else. And you'll usually want to pick Ecaz when there's some great 3-cost cards in the opening row, because you're guaranteed to get some decent value. The issue that comes up is that acquiring a ton of cards between reveals and the rings can really thicken up the deck. And if you're not getting the trash ability because you want to go to the faction access, you can end up with a really fat, clunky deck, which dilutes out your better cards. Overall, I would say he's better than the previous heroes, but the base ability and the Signet Ring abilities are useful, and it allows you to play a pretty unique game, especially if you can get your Swordmaster going early so you can be acquiring extra cards and trashing cards every single round. Unfortunately, you just need to be very careful with deck size, and that's something that gets out of control with Ecaz a lot. I think of him more as a very average hero that people overestimate a lot, and that's why he's going into the C tier. Our other C tier leader is going to be Paul Atreides. Their base ability is called Prescience, and they get to look at the top card of their deck at any time. This is a lot better than you'd think. You often end up in situations where you're trying to decide whether or not you should draw from your deck. For example, early in the game, when you're trying to decide between Carthag versus Arakeen to draw an extra card, you really don't want to be drawing into your faction access cards if you can't play them that turn. So it makes that decision a little bit easier. Additionally, later in the game, you don't want to be drawing into cards that you want to play for their action abilities. Like you wouldn't want to draw Smuggler Stopper as your last action. That's going to feel terrible. So it really helps with making big decisions later in the game and earlier in the game. The Signet Ring ability is called Discipline, and it's pretty straightforward. It lets you draw a card. It's a solid ability, and it synergizes very well with the base ability because you're going to know what card you're drawing with the Signet Ring, and you can decide whether or not it's worth to play your Signet Ring, given you know what the top card is. And like I said in my tutorial video, drawing cards is very powerful in this game. But let's be honest, you're pretty much just getting to start out with a Bene Gesserit Initiate, which is an okay card. Overall, he's a very flexible leader. He doesn't do anything unfair, but he can adapt well to most strategies. Getting the extra card draw is nice for buying slightly more expensive cards earlier in the game, but that's about it. He's also a pretty average leader that doesn't do anything too unfair. That's why he goes in C tier with Ecaz. Okay, next up we're going to be moving to the B tier, and this is where we're going to see Mr. Hundro Moritani. The base ability is called Intelligence, and at the start of the game you get to look at the top 2 cards of the Intrigue deck, keep one and put the other one back on top. This base ability isn't insane, but it's really solid. Starting out with a choice between 2 Intrigue cards can give you a really strong early advantage. You can pick up endgame cards that will allow you to guide a strategy around getting extra points, or you can get combat cards that can give you an early victory. Heck, even the Intrigue cards that give you extra influence can enable you to get an extra victory point by securing an earlier alliance. It's also nice because you get to know the intrigue card of whoever picks up the next intrigue. And heck, if you get 2 great intrigue cards, you know you can head to Carthag early and take the second one if you want. It's surprisingly good despite being a one and done mechanic. Unfortunately, it is a bit more luck based, so if you end up with 2 bad intrigue cards, you're going to feel bad about this ability, but I'd say more often than not, getting the 2 intrigue cards does minimize that risk of bad luck. And a lot of the intrigue cards are pretty good, so you're going to end up happy more often than not. Next up is the Signet Ring. It's called Couriers, and it lets you pay 1 spice to get 1 movement on the shipping track. And this is the best Signet Ring ability we've seen so far. The shipping track is so good in the Rise of X expansion, and getting to pay 1 spice to go to smuggling as an extra action is insane. Think about it, if you Signet Ring to smuggling, you're getting a free interstellar shipping. If you Signet Ring to interstellar shipping, you get to go up to and collect all of those juicy rewards in 1 single action. That's awesome value. Additionally, if you're already sitting at 2 or 3 bumps on the shipping track, you can send your Signet Ring to a combat space, pay the spice, and then collect all those rewards and send the troops in immediately. It's a super flexible Signet Ring ability, and it's where things start to get a little unfair with these leaders. That's why he's up in the B tier. B, A, and S can all do things slightly unfair to put themselves ahead. Overall, my opinion has really turned around on this leader. When I first started playing, I thought this guy was trash. I thought the base ability was okay, and the Signet Ring ability was whatever. But as you play this game more and more, you really start to realize how valuable that shipping track is. And getting an extra bump 3 to 4 times a game is huge. One thing you have to think about though is the other leaders your opponents are picking. If a Duke Leto or Baron Harkonnen or a Tessia is going immediately before you, that's kind of bad news because they're going to be able to get influence with the guild super fast, and they'll be blocking you on interstellar shipping the whole game. But despite that, he's still a very solid hero, and he makes great use of troop transport techs and the Imperium row cards that give extra shipping access. I've seen more and more people playing this character, getting good results, and it makes a lot of sense. He's a good leader. Next up to complete the B tier, also known as the Moritani tier, will be Princess Yuna Moritani, sitting together in this beautiful B tier. Her base ability is called Smuggling Operation, and unfortunately she doesn't get to start with any water, but whenever you gain Solari on your turn, you get to increase the amount gained by 1. That base ability is absolutely insane. Sure, it sucks missing out on the water, but it's not the end of the world. If you go to smuggling twice, that's 4 Solari plus 6 Solari for the actual collection if you decide to collect early. That's enough for a turn 2 Swordmaster, and it puts you well on your way to getting your High Council seat. Princess Yuna Moritani is the Solari Queen, and she gets Solari way more effectively than Count Ilban. Compare Count Ilban's 3 to 4 Solari drip throughout the entire game to Princess Yuna Moritani, who can get an extra 2 to 3 Solari in the first 2 turns. It feels broken at times, and getting that extra action or that extra 2 persuasion that earlier in the game can really propel her engine forward. Next up, her Signet Ring ability is called Final Delivery, and it lets you pay 7 Solari to get a rank up with a faction, a troop, and a spice. So this Signet Ring ability is usually going to be an end of game ability. It's a valuable use of Solari, but you're going to want to get your Swordmaster and your High Council first. Have I said that enough this tier list? I don't think so. The nice thing is that when you're playing it at the end of the game, you're still getting a rank up with a faction when playing to a non-faction spot. That's really good value, especially if you're going to the shipping track. If you Signet Ring to the shipping track, collect all the rewards, including the bump, You can spend the Solari to get a second bump. Getting a double bump in a single turn with a faction is insane because it really allows for the stealing of alliances. Overall, like I said, she's a Solari machine and she does what Count Ilban does, but better. You can just smash smuggling and wealth over and over again and get super early Swordmaster and High Council, which is an extremely valuable situation to be in. And her ring ability is solid. She also has some great synergy cards that she can buy, like Appropriate, Opulence, Bounty Hunter, and I'll show them all on the screen. The biggest issue is that she can be blocked if you have smart opponents in the game. If you get denied smuggling and wealth early, it's gonna feel bad. But overall, she's a really good character that affords a really unique playstyle, and I love playing as her. If you're enjoying the content, please consider subscribing. It really helps the channel out a lot, and it enables me to keep bringing you videos like this one. Okay, now we're moving up into our A tier, and our first member of the A tier is going to be the Beast. His base ability is called Arrakis Fiefdom, and you start the game with an extra spice and an extra Solari. This doesn't seem like much, but it's actually really significant. In the early game, it allows you to go to tech negotiation early and acquire a 2-cost tech card. For example, a super early Mimic Film can really get the Beast engine going. It enables better reveal turns and will allow for late game Spice Must Flow cards. Additionally, if you're going early in the round order, you can go to full space with your first action and then go to tech negotiation with your second action to pick up memo quarters for super fast interstellar shipping access. This can really screw up the second place player, especially if they went with the Baron Harkonnen, because now you can deny them interstellar shipping access. The one Solari is alright, it might enable a slightly earlier Swordmaster, but it's just alright. Next up, the Signet Ring, Brutality. The Signet Ring ability is called Brutality, and it gives you 1 extra troop when you play the ring. It'll give you 2 extra troops if you have at least 1 faction alliance. This is extremely powerful in the early game. It turns Carthag and Arakeen into hardy warrior spaces with upside, and getting early VPs from combats is insanely strong. That's 1 less Spice Must Flow you have to buy, or 1 less alliance you have to get in the late game. I see a lot of Beast players cost themselves a lot of victory points by fighting for an alliance when they don't really have to. That 1 extra troop, while valuable, isn't worth a lot of wasted effort. If you're racing with someone else up one of the faction alliance tracks and going all the way to the tippy top, there's an opportunity cost to that. You're probably missing out on a lot of the extra 2 influence victory points, and that'll hurt you in the long run. Those are hard points to make up. That being said, getting alliance is better than not getting alliance, of course, and the Emperor track can be a good one to fight for because it's usually not heavily fought over. It'll give you the Solari needed to get early Swordmaster, High Council, and if you actually cross into the alliance territory, it'll give you some extra troops as well, so overall, a solid one. I'd say overall, the Beast is a very well-balanced leader with many different strategic lines, which makes him fun to play. Even though he is the best combat leader, you don't have to force it. You still want to be going for consistent points by getting the 2 influence victory points, by getting Spice Must Flows, and you have to remember that conflicts can be a risky way to get points at the end. Sometimes you just won't be able to flip over the combats that get victory points, or other people will be fighting you really hard for those victory points and you won't be able to win them. So just remember to stay balanced and don't fall into the alliance trap or the I have to go combat every single round trap that you can with the Beast. Also, just remember he does make really good use of spy satellites. Getting those victory points for nothing and being able to race up to an alliance is just insane with the Beast. Okay, next up in A tier is going to be Tessia Vernius. Tessia Vernius is definitely the most complicated character in the game, and her base ability is pretty confusing. So how it works is you're going to start out with a snooper token at 2 influence on every influence track. And whenever you get to 2 influence, you're going to collect that snooper token and move it to the topmost uncovered space on the reward track. So for level 1, you'll get the discard a card to gain a spice. Level 2, you get the bonus from the influence track. Level 3, you get an extra bump on the track. And level 4, you get the combination of level 2 and 3 where you get the bonus on the track and you get an extra bump. So with Tessia, you have to get a ton of faction access and you have to go to those tracks a lot. You need to get 4 faction influence before you even get a decent reward from the base ability. And you need 8 total faction influence to get maximum value from the entire base ability. Now let's think about what that maximum value is. It's going to be 1 spice, 2 of the faction bonuses. Usually you'll aim for that to be water and an entry card. And you get 2 extra bumps on 2 tracks. That's a lot of work for some kind of meh rewards in my opinion. That, and you'll have to heavily invest in faction access, which can be an opportunity cost to buying some better cards. Of course, that extra investment will also be rewarded by 4 victory points, so it's not the worst thing in the world, and you usually try to get those victory points anyway, so those extra rewards are more of a cherry on top to what you're normally doing with other characters anyway. Generally, the ideal order for snooper token collection, you're going to want to go to the guild first, and that's because you want to get interstellar shipping access really early. Then you want to go to the Fremen, because generally getting that extra water will be great. And the extra bump won't be as valuable with them because usually the Fremen alliance can be pretty hotly contested. Next up, you'll want to go to the Emperor alliance for the extra bump because usually the Emperor alliance isn't really hotly contested. And lastly, you want to collect your 2-point snooper token with the Bene Gesserit, get an extra bump there because it's not a hotly contested alliance, and getting the intrigue card is great as a bonus. The issue I find with playing Tessia is if you're playing with good players, there are going to be a lot of people fighting for the less common alliances. And usually it takes a lot of time to get all of these faction rewards. And at the end of the game, if other good players are fighting for all the alliances, those extra bumps aren't going to mean anything because those alliances have already been taken. But while you're playing her, remember, Choem directorship is absolutely insane with Tessia and can enable super early victories. If you're able to collect all of those faction rewards that fast, and can easily enable you to get 6 points really quickly from the faction tracks. Also remember that power play and treachery are so good with Tessia, especially if you're using it when you have one influence with a faction. Think about it. If you have one influence with a Bene Gesserit, you play your power play, collecting the snooper token, so you move up to 3, and then you get the bonus bump, that automatically puts you up to 4. That's an alliance super quickly. Additionally, memo quarters, shuttle fleet are good as well. Just anything that gives you extra bumps with the tracks is going to be so important because you're racing to get all those snooper tokens as quickly as possible. Next up, we have the Signet Ring ability known as Duplicity, and this allows you to drop down with one faction to gain influence with a faction where you have a snooper token. It's a weird Signet Ring ability, but it's good. And the reason it's so good is because it allows for super early 2 influence with the guild. If you're going first this Tessia, it lets you go fold space with your first turn, and then second turn, you can go to Hardy Warriors or the Fremen spot or any of the other spots really, and shift that reward to the guild. And it can be a really solid counter if you're playing against a second turn Baron Harkonnen, because now you're going to be able to deny them interstellar shipping the entire game. So it's good in that it enables you to visit the higher value faction spaces and shunt them towards the ones you don't really want to go to. Unfortunately, the ring ability does shut down if you don't have the snooper token, so it doesn't allow you to steal alliances or anything like that, but it is solid and lets you get influence where you might not be able to otherwise. Overall, I'd say she's a good character because she can get super early shipping access, which is very powerful in this game, and she can be insanely powerful and finish games super early if she's able to get the right cards and techs that give extra faction influence. Unfortunately, she can feel a little bit useless if other players are fighting for a lot of alliances across the board, because then those late game bumps don't really mean anything, but you'll usually be able to get extra alliances if the other players aren't pushing for them. And additionally, Memo Quarters has a little bit of bonus value, not only because it gives you that extra faction bump, but it's a little bit easier with Tessia to get to 3 influence with all of the tracks, so she'll usually be able to get the extra victory point in the end game. Our last member of A tier is going to be a little bit controversial, but I think it's Countess Ariana Thorvald. What a great undervalued leader. Let's start out with the base ability, Spice Addict. Whenever you harvest spice, you gain 1 less spice and you get to draw a card. This is a good ability. Most of the triangle access cards you start with have low persuasion and it allows you to cycle them out for better cards. And the 1 spice cost isn't that big of a deal. It's effectively Count Ilban's ability, but it costs 1 spice instead of 2 Solari by having to go to the Mentat. And especially in the Rise of X expansion, there's a lot more spice building up on the triangle spaces. So losing out on 1 spice isn't that costly. Also, going to collect spice can feel bad. Normally when you go there, you get to collect the spice, you can send in garrison troops if you have them, and that's about it. But this card draw gives you a little bit extra value from going there. It effectively makes collecting spice into a Arakeen without the troop, and you'll actually end up getting more spice throughout the entire game because it doesn't feel so bad collecting the spice. That and the Signet Ring ability will give you water to afford going to the Great Flat and the Haga Basin more often. Speaking of the Signet Ring, it's called Hidden Reservoir, and it gives you an extra water every time you play your ring. This is such insane value. Getting water in this game is annoying. Still Suits and Siege Tabor are pretty low value spaces, and less people are going to get water in this expansion because there are so many high value spaces early on. So first of all, getting this extra water enables multiple trips to Hardy Warriors in the early game to get more early game victory points. This is huge. It gives Ariana Thorvald a lot more flexibility to be an early combat character. Additionally, getting that extra water, getting up 2 pretty quickly, can enable you to hostage the Great Flat and collect a very large chunk of spice. Lastly, even if you aren't using the waters when you collect them, it can set up for multiple research station turns in the end game, allowing you to buy a lot more spice must flows. So overall, Ariana Thorvald is a very powerful character. She has early and late game combat potential because early on she has the water to spend on Hardy Warriors, and late game she's able to collect more spice than everyone else, so she's able to go to Highliners if people are leaving a lot of spice up for grabs, which people generally tend to do in this expansion. Additionally, she also has a very powerful spice must flow strategy because she can go to research station over and over again in the end game if she's not spending the water to collect spice. And obviously Saidin is going to be a game breaking card with Ariana just because she's able to get that 3 water to buy the victory points so easily. She's a very flexible leader, she's a very powerful leader, and that's why she's at the top of A tier for me. So now we're jumping up into the S tier, and this is the tier where both the base ability and the Signet Ring abilities are truly insane and border on unfair. We're going to start out with Helena Richese. Her base ability is called Eyes Everywhere, and enemy agents don't block her on agents at green or blue spaces. This ability is absolutely nuts. Not being blocked on green can get Swordmaster High Council whenever you want, and it can always turn a dagger into a tech negotiation to buy better cards in the early game. And not being blocked on blue is also super powerful. It enables the visiting of city spaces whenever you want, so you can get early intrigues, or you can try to buy better cards by drawing cards, or you can get extra water for late game research stations. Not being blocked on those spaces enables her to have so much flexibility and gives her options that none of the other leaders have. She can always value going to a faction space first because she knows the other spaces she wants to go to likely won't be blocked. Her signet ring ability is called Manipulate and allows her to remove and replace a card in the Imperium row, and during her reveal turn, she can acquire that card for one less. If she doesn't acquire it, it goes in the trash. And in my opinion, this is where Helena Richese really becomes an S tier character. If there is an S tier card in the opening row, it's an easy Helena pick. If you can get an early Lady Jessica or a Liet Kynes or a Kwisatz Haderach, her engine becomes game breaking. And she can pick off other powerful cards as well. So as a leader, she has the best time of building an insane engine because she can get all the powerful cards, and if she can't afford it, she's not blocked on green, so she can go to tech negotiation whenever she wants, turning that dagger into an extra persuasion to buy an already discount card that she reserved for herself. Also, the signet ring ability is awesome because it can deny great cards from other players. Let's say there's another leader with 3 techs and Ixian Engineer comes off the top. Ixian Engineer would suck in your deck, especially if you don't have any techs, but you can use your signet ring to scoop it out of the row and trash it at the end of the round. It really enables her to block other characters much easier. Overall, she's an S tier character because she has this insane engine building ability and can acquire her cards before anyone else. Also, her ability to be unblocked makes her even more flexible. Just don't forget you can go to the blocked areas like I do every time I play her. Our next S tier leader is going to be the Duke Leto Atreides. We'll start out with the base ability known as Landsrad Popularity. And when sending an agent to a green board space, he gets to pay 1 less Solari. You know how Count Ilban wants to go and get the Mentat, but they shouldn't? The Duke Leto wants to get the Mentat and should. 1 Solari for an extra action and a card is insane value. And the Swordmaster and the High Council seat are discounted, so you can get them even earlier even if you're getting the Mentat. Hell, you can even get Dreadnoughts if you want. They only cost 2 Solari after all. It's actually kind of annoying how Rhomhur's whole thing is Dreadnoughts, and Duke Leto is able to build a better Dreadnought strategy right out of the gate because the Dreadnoughts are discounted. This Solari discount is awesome value, and in a way, makes him the second best Solari leader right after Princess Yuna. Think about it. The Duke Leto can get the Mentat 3 rounds in a row, saving 3 Solari. That's basically all the Solari that Ilban's going to get out of his signet ring throughout the entire game. And Duke Leto can do that in the first 3 turns. He saves even more Solari when he goes to get his High Council seat and a Swordmaster. Such a powerful Solari economy with Duke Leto. Additionally, his signet ring is insane. The signet ring ability is called Prudent Diplomacy, and it lets you pay 1 spice to gain 1 influence with a faction where an opponent has more influence than you. This is a super high value signet ring ability. It's actually insane. It allows him to easily get all 4 of the victory points from the 2 influence faction levels throughout the course of the game. And he can even chase down alliances and pass people with the signet ring. If you play your signet ring to shipping, that's a 2 influence bump. If you play your signet ring and an intrigue card in the same turn, that's another 2-point bump. It is so easy for Duke Leto to steal alliances. In my opinion, he's the best alliance stealer in the game, and when you're playing against him, you have to be very careful with your alliances because it's just so easy for him to take it away from you. Overall, he's a super powerful leader, and I think there's an argument to be made that he's the best leader. He has super strong faction influence. He can take Mentats, gain extra actions and card draws non-stop while still being able to easily afford the Swordmaster and the High Council. He's a very consistent leader with a game plan that can be repeated over and over again for the win. Very powerful, super consistent, win, 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 win. Last up, the most powerful leader in the game, the Baron Vladimir Harkonnen. His base ability is called Masterstroke, and at the start of the game, you get to secretly choose 2 factions. When he's able to deploy 4 troops in a single turn, you reveal them both and you get a bonus with each of the tracks. This ability is so good. You get 2 bonus influence when you deploy 4 troops. If you can go Fold Space and Hardy Warriors early in the game, that's instant access to interstellar shipping, and also instant access to Siege Tabor. Additionally, because you're playing Hardy Warriors, you're also winning that combat. So in 1 turn, you're deploying 4 troops, winning a combat, and you're getting 2 influence with 2 different factions. That is insane value. The Duke will realistically get 3 to 4 uses of the ring max throughout the entire game, but they also have to pay spice for each bump, and they have to catch up to somebody else. They can't pass them with the ring. Compare that to the Baron's base ability that gives him 2 bumps early in the game, doesn't cost them anything, and they can shoot ahead of other players with it. It's such a super high value base ability. Next up, the signet ring is called Scheme. Pretty straightforward. It lets you pay 1 Solari to get 1 intrigue card. Intrigue cards are absolutely busted in this game. Sure, they have the highest luck factor, but they can easily grant bonus victory points via extra influence, combat cards to get combat victory points, and even straight up victory points through getting the endgame cards. Getting an extra intrigue card for 1 Solari is sick value, and getting an extra 3 to 4 intrigue cards per game if you're playing the signet ring often, super valuable. Additionally, you don't have to be as worried about how much Solari you're spending because in theory, if you're the Baron and you get early access to interstellar shipping, you can go there over and over again and get all the Solari you need for your Swordmaster, for your High Council seat, all while still being being able to forward the Solari for these intrigue cards. Overall, he's the best hero in the game, especially when going second when they can get off an early fold space into Hari Warrior's combo like I talked about. That Masterstroke ability giving 2 bonus faction access for free is absolutely insane, and match it with a Signet Ring ability that gives you extra intrigues makes him into a truly game-breaking leader. I think Duke Leto and the Baron Harkonnen are very powerful, and honestly, I think I'm splitting hairs putting one above the other. They could both be equally S-tier leaders, but this is how I currently rank everybody. Let me know in the comments if you disagree with anything. I'm definitely down to talk about all this, and thanks for watching.